A storm of steel from 1,500 Soviet guns marked the beginning of Berlin's end. 3 Soviet armies formed an iron ring around 2 million trapped civilians. Families were torn apart at train stations, children wearing only paper tags instead of names, and 14-year-old boys were handed anti-tank weapons and sent to die in the streets. Deep underground, thousands huddled in darkness as their city was pulverized above. The battle was fought room by room, where death lurked in every doorway and shadow. Surgeons operated by lamplight as falling concrete dust covered the bleeding. From the ashes, survivors desperately picked out tiny fragments of their shattered lives. Night brought no relief, only a burning hellscape lit by tracer fire and explosions. Deep in the bunker, the maps finally revealed the inescapable truths of total defeat. 2 chosen men carefully prepared the red banner that would soon crown the ruined capital. Through smoke and darkness, every marble corridor of the Reichstag became a slaughterhouse. At dawn, the red flag finally flew above the ashes, cementing the ultimate Soviet victory. By bare hands and human chains, the women and elderly began moving mountains of rubble. Walls vanished under thousands of handwritten notes from those desperately seeking lost loved ones. A single toy pulled from the wreckage offered a fragile glimpse of childhood innocence. Decades later, ordinary hands and simple hammers tore down the concrete wall of division. Today, Berlin glows not with the fires of war, but with the bright lights of a united Europe. Where blood was once spilled, old enemies now stand side by side in silent remembrance. In a city rebuilt from dust, preserving the memory of the fallen remains its greatest foundation. The Soviets entered Berlin from the east, advancing block by block with mechanical precision. Our last defenders were grandfathers and schoolboys, holding the line with whatever weapons remained. Stalin's organs, we called them, rockets that turned entire city blocks to rubble in seconds. In every shelter, farewell letters were written, words that might survive even if their authors did not. These Soviet leaflets promised good treatment to those who surrendered. Many discovered too late the promise was empty. The subway became our underground city. 12 stations connected by tunnels housed thousands. Soviet tactics were refined by years of war, tanks and infantry working as one unstoppable organism. Children learned to distinguish between calibers of shells by their unique whistling sounds. Soviet sappers cleared our carefully built barricades in hours. What took weeks to build fell in moments. Each building became a fortress, each window a firing position in the desperate final defense. Their heavy tanks fired shells that could punch through 3 buildings before exploding. The Soviets deliberately split the city into isolated pockets to prevent any coordinated defense. No weapon inspired more fear than the flamethrower. It left no survivors and no place to hide. Water became more precious than gold. People risked snipers to fill a single bucket. The Reichstag became both tactical objective and symbolic prize. Its capture would signal Germany's end. Soviet officers controlled their forces with remarkable precision, despite the chaos of urban fighting. Those who could flee westward did, hoping to surrender to Americans rather than face the Soviets. Night paddles transformed familiar streets into alien landscapes of shadow and sudden death. Each bridge became its own battlefield, critical crossing points that determined the flow of battle. Some Soviet medics showed unexpected kindness, treating German civilians with the same care as their own. The Tiergarten became a killing field, each tree providing cover, each statue a sniper's nest. All paths led to the government district, the prize both sides knew would determine the battle's outcome. Unit by unit, German forces surrendered when ammunition ran out or positions became untenable. The Soviets prepared meticulously for the Reichstag assault, the symbolic capture they needed for victory. When Soviet troops secured Hitler's bunker, they found evidence of suicide, but not the body they sought. The final Reichstag assault cost hundreds of Soviet lives, but nothing would stop them taking their prize. Each bullet hole in the Reichstag walls represents a soldier who fought and possibly died in those final hours. Soviet soldiers covered the Reichstag walls with their names, graffiti that still remains preserved today. Though staged for cameras later, the flag raising marked history's endpoint. Berlin had fallen. When we finally emerged from shelters, many couldn't recognize their own streets anymore. With signatures on paper, what Hitler called his 1,000-year Reich ended in just 12 years. Our first meal after surrender came from Soviet field kitchens. Enemies became providers overnight. Soviet officers photographed Hitler's office extensively, a trophy proving their ultimate victory. Just days after fighting ended, victory parades began, conquerors marching through a city still burning. Some Soviet soldiers showed unexpected kindness to children, small gestures amid enormous cruelty. The Trimmer Frauen, rubble women, cleared Berlin brick by brick, a task that would take years. Within months, Berlin was carved into 4 sectors, the physical manifestation of a new, divided world. The Reichstag survived, though scarred beyond recognition, a battered witness to Germany's darkest chapter. Former allies became rivals almost immediately, their cooperation masking growing Cold War tensions. The Berlin airlift delivered hope along with supplies, proving the West wouldn't abandon us. American pilots dropped candy with tiny parachutes for children waiting below. They called it Operation Little Victuals. We woke one morning in 1961 to find our city sliced in half by barbed wire and concrete. The wall claimed at least 140 lives, people shot while attempting to reach freedom just meters away. 2 Berlins emerged, a vibrant West and a gray East, physical proof of competing ideologies. More than 5,000 people escaped despite the dangers, choosing potential death over certain oppression. The announcement came without warning. Suddenly, the wall that defined our lives was open. Ordinary citizens dismantled the wall with simple tools. What armies couldn't do, people achieved peacefully. Berlin today stands whole again, its scars visible but healed, a testament to human resilience against all odds. On October 3rd, 1990, Germany became one nation again after 45 years of division. In one lifetime, I've carried 5 different passports while living in the same Berlin house. The wall that defined our lives for decades disappeared piece by piece within months. The Reichstag's restoration symbolized Germany itself, preserving history while building for the future. Berlin deliberately preserves war damage as visible reminder of what must never return. The Reichstag's glass dome symbolizes the transparency missing from our troubled past. Where death strips once lay barren, Europe's most modern square now thrives with life. Berlin rebuilt its heart at Potsdamer Platz, erasing the scar that once divided the city. Tourists now pose for photographs. We're attempting to cross what once meant death. A brass line in the pavement traces the wall's path, subtle reminder of a division now overcome. The Holocaust Memorial's disorienting design forces visitors to confront our darkest chapter. The actual Reichstag victory flag rests in climate-controlled storage, a simple cloth that marked history's turning point. Soviet soldiers covered the Reichstag walls with their names, graffiti that remains preserved in today's parliament. The Reichstag's glass dome allows citizens to look down on their representatives, democracy made visible. The Reichstag now serves its original purpose, housing the democracy that rose from dictatorship's ashes. Hitler's bunker site remains largely unmarked to prevent neo-Nazi pilgrimage. Not all history deserves monuments. Berlin's massive flak towers proved too solid to demolish. Now they serve as museums and climbing walls. Berlin's darkest chapters now draw millions of tourists seeking to understand how civilization nearly ended. Touching the wall connects visitors to a divided past that grows increasingly difficult to imagine. Despite political changes, Berlin maintains Soviet war memorials with careful respect for those who died. Museums now tell Berlin's complex story through objects that survived when buildings and people did not. Children born into united Berlin struggle to comprehend the wall that defined their parents' lives. My grandchildren draw Berlin with bright colors, knowing nothing of its divided past. Berlin returned as a diplomatic capital, hosting world leaders where once only armies gathered. The Brandenburg Gate, once trapped in no man's land, now hosts celebrations for all Berliners. Community gardens now grow where guard dogs once patrolled, life returning to the death strip. Former East Berlin neighborhoods now house residents from around the world, diversity replacing uniformity. Berlin remains Europe's largest construction site, perpetually becoming rather than being. The empty bookshelf memorial reminds us that destruction begins with burning books, not buildings. 30,000 runners now race freely, where once a handful risked death attempting to cross. The wall's path has become Berlin's most popular bike trail, leisure replacing terror along its route. Street names tell Berlin's political story, renamed with each regime change, a cartographic palimpsest. The Reichstag preserves Soviet soldiers' victory graffiti, their names now part of the parliament they helped make possible. Berlin at night reveals nothing of its divisions. Light erased the scars that daylight still shows. Berlin reclaimed its cultural prominence. The city of Beethoven and Bach now hosts the world's finest musicians. The topography of terror stands where Gestapo headquarters once operated, forcing visitors to confront uncomfortable truths. Checkpoint Charlie balances precariously between historical site and tourist attraction, history as entertainment. Museums now preserve everyday life under socialism, the ordinary made historic by politics' end. The TV tower, once socialist propaganda, now serves as Berlin's most recognizable landmark. Berlin's Jewish Museum doesn't merely document loss here. It creates a disorienting emotional experience. Berlin's Central Station reunited Europe's railways, healing the scars where tracks once ended at the wall. The Stasi archives hold kilometers of surveillance files, victims now free to read what the state wrote about them. From crystal radio to smartphone, technology's advance parallels Berlin's own transformation. Berlin's Festival of Lights transforms our monuments, history becoming canvas for artistic expression.
Each year, Germany's leaders publicly acknowledge our historical burden, remembrance as national duty.
Destruction rarely proceeds without delay. Berlin's soil still yields unexploded bombs and forgotten bunkers. Streets once patrolled by secret police now host celebrations of diversity unimaginable in divided Berlin. The wall became the world's largest canvas for dreams of freedom and artistic expression. I've collected newspapers from Berlin's key moments, headlines that marked the endings and beginnings. Former enemies now share coffee as friends, a personal reconciliation mirroring our national journey. Today's students learn about the wall as ancient history, as distant to them as the Roman Empire. Music now unites where politics once divided. Berlin's cultural rebirth growing from ruins. Berlin now competes to host world events. A city once isolated now seeks global attention. Berlin's restoration uses centuries-old craftsmanship alongside modern technology, bridging past and future. Tempelhof's runways, built for Hitler's Air Force, now serve as Berlin's largest public playground. Virtual reality now allows people to walk through 1945 Berlin, experiencing what photographs only suggest. Germany hosts world leaders where once it faced world condemnation. Berlin's diplomatic rebirth complete. Berlin, once full of German refugees from the East, now welcomes refugees from around the world. The factories that once built tanks now house startups and technology firms, industrial past becoming digital future. Berlin's film festival confronts our history through art, processing trauma through storytelling. Families now raise children, where border guards once patrolled with shoot-to-kill orders. Historic border crossings now serve as perfect backdrops for tourist selfies, history as backdrop for social media. Berlin's population today is younger and more international than at any point in its long history. Guest workers who came to West Berlin during division became permanent citizens, enriching our culture. Berlin remains Europe's largest construction site, a city perpetually becoming rather than being. Jewish traditions return to a city that once tried to erase them. Small stones marking renewed presence. Berlin's government district combines glass transparency with historical substance, a visual metaphor for modern Germany. Street art, once a political act of defiance, is now Berlin's celebrated visual identity. From city of destruction to capital of cool, Berlin's transformation continues to surprise even me. Former death strips are now ordinary streaks, their deadly history invisible to daily commuters. Berlin debates constantly whether to rebuild exactly as before or create something entirely new. The decisions that divided Berlin were made with pens on paper, bureaucracy creating decades of separation. 1 million people now celebrate New Year at the Brandenburg Gate, once an empty no man's land. Berlin's planners must balance preservation with innovation, respecting the past while building for the future. My family photo album tells Berlin's story, from destruction to division to reunification. Berlin's universities attract students from around the world, academic excellence rising from ruins. Tourists now queue to see the city that once prohibited most visitors from entering at all. Coding replaces manufacturing in Berlin's economy, digital products flowing where tanks once rolled. Berlin's skyline tells its story, each building representing a chapter in our complicated history. Our greatest responsibility is telling the next generation honestly what happened here and why. This small piece of concrete changed the world when it fell, from barrier to souvenir in one night. Modern technology projects our history onto our present, making the invisible past visible again. Berlin's story is one of destruction and rebirth, a warning and promise for future generations.